I am your host, Chinmay Bharati, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. This is, I think, our first non-race weekend show of this term, and I thought we're about 4 races in now. We can start with just rating how the drivers have got on getting on with these new regulations. And I can't do this on my own, so I might as well just introduce my co-host Will. How are you doing?
I'm back. The essays are grinding me down. I wish they were over at some point.
Yeah. Essays for non-STEM students and projects for engineering students.
Projects for real degrees.
Yep. And we also have 2 guests with me as well. We have 2 returning guests, actually. Kavin, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, mate. Cheers.
Yep. And we also have Hushrav. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Yep. Cool. So, I think we'll just dive straight in. So basically what we'll do, we'll go in reverse championship order and basically just rate them from 1 to 10 to see how we feel they've done. And I think we'll just start with Nicolas Satifie, who's somehow 21st in the 2020 Driver Championship. I'm just looking. He's not exactly had the best start to the season, has he? Well,
no. He's 16th in Bahrain, retired in Saudi Arabia because then he crashed. Yeah, he crashed. And 16th each in Australia and Imola. It's been a tough one for Latifi. I don't think that car is necessarily the best. I think it's quite touch and go at the moment between like the Williams and the Aston Martin in particular about where they are. I think both of them are actually done very well to sort of move up and now like beginning to challenge for points. I'm sure we'll move on to it with Alex Albon. But Latifi just in a bit of a rut at the moment and doesn't seem to be doing that well.
Well, bear in mind this thing. We just had the last race where Latifi's first weekend where he probably has not crashed into anybody.
I was going to say it might not all be grim because granted he's had 3 shocking races, but Imola was I think the first weekend where he's gone without a major shunt, and while that might be a kind of laughable occurrence to many people, it is something that's needed for a racing driver to build his confidence back up. So for his sake, I am hoping he uses the Imola weekend, even though the result might not have been what he wanted. I hope he uses it as a confidence builder because Imola is a driver's track. It is a track that's notoriously easy to lose it at. So the fact that he's historically also done well at Imola in the previous years, I hope he moves forward from this point on because he isn't a bad driver in my opinion. He's just not had the best of starts this year.
The weird thing is that the gap to Albon is larger than the gap he had to Russell. Like last season he was relatively competitive with Russell, especially in the races, but this season he's like a Capuccio and Mario Kart. He just causes the safety cars and bunches the packs up. So yeah, he seems to be the one who's like struggling from Mazepin going out because now it's put the focus on him as like the bottom feeder of the grid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he is as bad as people are saying. I think possibly, I do think he's probably got the drive because of obviously money, but in Australia, his crash with Stroll wasn't his fault. Stroll just wasn't looking in his mirrors. He's done very well in Imola in conditions that he's not normally been that confident in. I remember back to Turkey 2020, he had a torrid time on that race. So keeping it on the track, keeping it, and getting it to the finish line, like fair play to him. Obviously, he is last in the championship, 21st in a 20-man championship, so we've got to take that into account. But I think he can use it as a springboard.
Yeah. So, what do you think you'll give it score out of 10, considering the first 4 races, Hushrav?
I think I would have to score him very low right now, 4 out of 10. But that being said, I am pretty open, and I really wish to see him do well because, as Will said, he is not a bad driver.
Yeah.
I'll give him a 2 out of 10. I think when you're like getting praise for not crashing out of a race, you're doing like the minimum expected of what F1 drivers should do.
I was going to go for a 3 actually. I think again, like obviously he's been praised for not crashing out, which isn't the best thing in the world, but I think he will take time to get used to the car. He seemed to do that in 2021. He was getting closer to Russell by the end of the season, and I imagine that'll be something that happens this season as well.
Yeah, I think I might just check it out. I think Latifi has not crashed in 1 race out of 4. That's quite a statistic to have. I mean, yeah, he's not exactly in the fastest car in the grid, but I think especially compared to how Albon's been doing, I think I have to give him a 3 out of 10 as well. So,
and that averages out to 3.
Which is really nice.
Maths is easy.
So, and I think what Miles and Miller too, you can always call it honorable mention in this in this group. Nico Hulkenberg. We can say we count him right now because there's only 2 out of 4 races that he's been in. So that's pretty much half the season he's competed in, even though he has not an official driver. But especially with the whole Hulkenberg thing, I think he's done a decent job despite. Especially knowing that he's being 9th in the constructors with Aston Martin.
Yeah, he didn't have any pre-season testing, so you can't really take too much into like the gaps, especially in the races. But in the first qualifying, I think he beat Stroll by almost 4/10, which like Vettel was struggling to do.
And I think you can't really compare it to all the other Hulkenberg variations he's had because you have to understand all the other times he did swap out for Perez and Stroll were in a car that was 3rd, even 2nd fastest in that season, whereas this time he's in quite a shambolic car in its current state. So the fact that he outqualified his teammate who's had 3 years in the team with no preseason testing and then he was beaten in the race but not comprehensively, I think is a good reflection of the reliable driver we know Hulkenberg has been.
I've always backed him. I will die on this hill. If he was in that Racing Point in 2020, he would have got a podium. I'm 100% sure of that. He qualified, 3rd at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. He managed to finish about 8th at the German Grand Prix despite rocking up to the track on the Saturday. He's a very good driver. It just never really worked out for him. He never really got the car that had that pace for the podium. Obviously, there was that one like Brazil 2012. He could have got up there. Baku, I think 2017 or 2018 was another chance before he hit the wall. But his performances this season, 17th and 12th. I mean, the Aston Martin at the start of the season was one of the slowest cars. As I was saying before, both teams have both Williams and Aston Martin have sort of closed the gap. So I think a fairly decent performance, and to be honest, not much more than he could have expected for.
Yeah, you got anything else to add, Kevin? Or
not really.
So I think we'll just jump into his rating. I think I'll probably give him a good 6 out of 10 for, especially considering the car performance at the time and the fact that he had no prior testing or anything like that. So
I think I would assess him a 6 as well.
Yeah, 6.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything else that's fair in a way because he came into the car no pre-season testing, new cars as well. Yeah, he had experience driving, I guess, the Racing Point. It was fairly similar to 2017 regs, but he done well.
So we're good 6. And then we'll move on to a driver that I think we've been expecting a bit more out of, considering especially his teammate. But Mick Schumacher, he's not exactly had the greatest starts to a season.
Yeah.
But
he hasn't. I think Mick squandered a few points opportunities, but at the same time, I wouldn't exactly worry about Mick right now because I think it should be fairly evident with Mick's career trajectory right now that Mick is not one to adapt to a new car quickly. I mean, you could argue that, yes, he's had 1 year of experience in F1, but let's be honest, last year's F1 regs compared to this year's F1 regs pretty much make it an entirely new category. It's barely even the same car. Pretty much the only thing that's common between last year and this year is the people he's worked with. It is pretty much a different machine to drive. And through F3, F2, F1, Mick has never been quick to adapt to his car. So I do think there's a lot more to come from Mick. I am not sure he might yet match up to Magnussen at the end of the season because Magnussen, in my opinion, is one of the best drivers on our current grid. So he has a high bar to reach for. But nonetheless, I do think relative to Magnussen, Mick will improve through the season. But for now, he's made a few mistakes.
Yeah, so far I think he's been quite awful, honestly. Because Magnussen has had a year out of the sport, so he's obviously not performing a peak. And also, he didn't have the first test as well. And to have 0 points in a seriously fast car, I mean, the gaps he's being beaten by Magnussen is just too much.
I think we've got a Gasly-Tsunoda situation with Haas at the moment. I think Gasly last year performing exceptionally well, and it's very difficult to judge how well Tsunoda was doing in that car. And I think you've got the same thing here. I think, obviously, Magnussen, 5th in his first race back, which is incredible in a Haas. That is incredible. And I would say that Schumacher's really not had that great of a start to the season. I think it's better than Latifi. That's not really saying much, but I think there's a balance that Magnussen is probably outperforming that car, but I think Schumacher's also underperforming it. Obviously, finished, I want to say, or started 10th in Imola, but then obviously had his half spin, maybe not entirely his fault, distracted by obviously the Sainz Ricardo incident, crashed in Saudi Arabia and was withdrawn from that race. I don't think he did anything of note in Bahrain and Australia.
Yeah, he's only 11th and 13th, which basically he's just there.
I think that idea that he will improve will definitely come into it, because we've seen that before, but at the moment, what we're judging it off, there's not really much that favours him.
Yeah. So, what do you think you'll rate him?
I would have to give him, with his current performance, a 5, but I wouldn't be surprised if our end-of-season ratings show a way bigger improvement for him.
I'll give him a 4. If he doesn't pick up his performances, I think even his surname can't save him from losing the Haas seat.
Yeah, I think I'll go for a 4 as well.
I was going to go for a 4 as well. I think if I'm giving Latifi a 3, then I can't exactly go much lower than that.
Happy with that? So, yeah, I think Mick's got not much to go for. And also, now we move on to Lance Stroll, a driver with not exactly the best reputation in Formula 1, and has had to fight a lot of F1 fans to see why he deserves an F1 seat. And yeah, he did have a points finish last weekend in Imola, but 12th, 13th and 12th, he's just been there.
I would say he's... See, did he do anything in Bahrain or Saudi Arabia? No, that I've just forgotten about.
Not really, no.
Or was he just there, driving?
Yeah, just there. But in Saudi Arabia, he was almost in the points for like the whole race.
Yeah, so that's the thing.
Got him.
So yeah, he was almost in the points for the whole race in Saudi Arabia. He was almost in the points for the whole race in Australia. Yeah. Obviously, Australia is really tarnished by the fact he was a massive idiot in qualifying and practice.
Yeah.
But he got points in Imola. He almost got points in Saudi Arabia. He almost got points in Australia. I don't think he's actually had that bad of a season so far in a car that's not that good.
I think if you isolate Australia, which was just a shocking race weekend for Aston Martin as a team, he's had a very... For the machinery he's not had a bad season. Yeah. And points in Imola, in those conditions, which we know he's historically been very, very good at, I would say it's been a good season. It's nothing to write home about, but at the same time, it's better than the seasons we've analysed so far. But then again, we can't just isolate Australia, because Australia has been a part of our current season. So if you do factor that in, Stroll did make a few mistakes there, a few too many maybe, but he's had a decent season otherwise.
But I mean, when it comes to it, in the race, when it actually mattered, Stroll had a good race. Realistically, his mistake was blocking Bottas off.
Yeah, but he
5-second penalty.
He overtook Bottas earlier, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he was in a much better car. So.
Obviously, he probably got Alex Albon points in the end with his 5 second, or holding everyone up, sorry. When it matters, Stroll has actually performed quite well this season, and I think he's flying under the radar, and I think he gets a lot more bad publicity than maybe he deserves.
Probably because it's just Stroll.
Yeah.
But, so what do you think you'll rate him?
So if I gave Mick a 4, I can't go below a 6. I think I would agree with you too. Yeah.
A 6 is probably a good number, especially knowing how shocking the Aston Martin car was, and especially in the first 2 races.
I think if I went with 6 for Nico, which was doing the best he could with his machinery, then I would have to give Lance a 7. Just because of the point he's gotten Imola.
I'll give him a 6.5.
6. Oh, now I have to do maths.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Or shall we just say 6.5?
No, we can do
No, I can do it.
25.5.
25.5. It's 6. What's 1.25 divided by 4?
That would be...
I think it's 6.375.
Oh, you just made it so difficult for me. This is why I do humanities. Just can't do the maths.
That's alright. But yeah, I think he's pretty much been flying under the radar, and I think now we move on to driver who's been not so much on the radar, especially considering his points finish in Australia. Alex Albon. a new tyre whisperer, shall we call him, especially doing that 56 lap stint on hard tyres in Australia.
Yeah. Honestly, I think he's been unbelievable, especially considering the expectations I had for him. Like, I haven't really rated it that much before, but he's putting a bigger gap on Latifi than George Russell did. And that's like saying something. Williams is probably the slowest car so far on the grid, and his driving Australia to get a point was pretty good.
Probably 50-50 with the Aston Martin at the moment.
Yeah. I think, but yeah, especially considering Albon's been a very consistent performer, and I think he definitely he probably deserves 6.5, 7, especially knowing how well he's managed to outperform that Williams compared to Latifi.
Well, I think one thing about this season in particular is that it's actually really close. Notwithstanding Latifi, remove him from the equation for a second.
Schumacher, maybe.
So, no, but not even that.
In terms of, pace.
So, not even that. It's just the top 19 drivers, the worst. Schumacher's the only one, but he's finished 11th on one occasion. Then everyone else has got points. Every team has got points, which I think, I was mentioning this last week, probably the earliest in F1 history that every team has got points. The regulations realistically have worked. Maybe not at the top, but they brought the midfield closer together, so it's a lot more difficult to judge who's doing well. And I think Albon is doing well. Obviously, that 56 lap stint in Australia is it was unbelievable. I think I'd also knock him up because it's first 4 races in a new team.
I think Albon's season has been a two-parted season so far. I mean, I could split his 4 races right across the middle. I think Bahrain and Saudi, he had nothing special, nothing that caught anyone's eye. Saudi, in fact, he was involved with a bit of a silly collision with Lance at the end, if I remember correctly. Again, Australia, that monster stint on the hards was really, really impressive. And then Imola as well, if you compare to Latifi, relative to where Albon was, you could say Albon comfortably outperformed the car, and he probably finished way higher than the car should have allowed him to. So I think Albon's first 2 races were fairly average, nothing special, but the last 2 have been pretty stellar, and I would rate him, I think, 7 for that. 7,
yeah, I'll go with the 7 as well.
I'll go with 8.
I'll go with a 6.5.
Ooh.
I don't know. I feel like it's weird because obviously he's got a point. He was very close to one in Imola as well, though no one could overtake Bane of my life, that track. But I think it's a tough one. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but I think I need to see a bit more. And especially, I think Williams, again, we have a Gasly-Tsunoda situation in which one driver's a lot better than the other.
Yeah, I think.
So what does that add up to? 6.5 plus 7 plus 7 plus 8?
Yeah.
So that's...
29.5.
28 point.
28, I don't know.
28.5 over 4, so that gives us 7.125.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
But yeah, I think we'll just move on quickly on to Zhou Guanyu, our main rookie of the season. Points debut, otherwise pretty much been under the radar. I mean, he's had 10th, 11th, and 15th. Kind of a slight downwards curve in terms of positions, but I don't...
The 15th was because of the crash in the sprint qualifying.
Yeah.
I can't remember he qualified.
It was sprint qualifying, and also I think his Saudi Arabia weekend, him and Bottas actually were hampered by a clutch problem at the start.
Yeah.
So Bottas could recover because he was a bit higher up the field.
I mean, Bottas retire at that race?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, because there was 4...
Yeah.
They all retired on the same lap for some odd reason.
Both the Alphas had identical clutch problems for the first 2 races, which they have sorted out. But yeah, that pretty much killed off Zhou's Saudi Arabia race.
He also got a drive-through penalty, wasn't in that race? It wasn't his fault, and he almost finished in the points, just outside. So.
But yeah, so what do you reckon?
I think I'd have to say I think he's had a very similar season to Albon. He's in a better car, but obviously first 4 races of his F1 career, I think if I'm giving Albon a 6.5, I'd probably give Zhou a 6.5 as well.
I think the reason I'd actually rate Zhou this season more than his on-track performances, which a point isn't bad, I think the reason I'd actually rate him is given the expectations people had from him and just the sheer criticism he was put through before the start of the season. I haven't seen that much criticism for anyone since Stroll came into the sport, which says a lot. So I think given all the pressure he's had on him, and also the gamble of not knowing if Alpha would actually turn up with a good car this season, I think Zhou's done respectably well enough. It's nothing that's speaking like driver world champion, but going up against a very formidable teammate, I think he's done a commendable job so far.
Yeah,
I'll give him a 6 out of 10.
I'll probably give him 6 as well.
So I think I would give him a 6 as well.
Yeah.
I've rated Albon the worst, but Zhou the best. What's going on here? So that'll be 6.125 if I can do maths correctly.
So yeah, I think so. That's pretty much. So we pretty much just gone through the first bottom 7 or so in the championship.
You want me to run through the scores?
So
quickly?
yeah, can do.
So we've got Latifi on 3 out of 10. Hulkenberg we've given a 6. Mick Schumacher a 4.75. And then it gets interesting. Stroll with a 6.375, Albon with a 7.125, and Zhou on 1 point less with a 6.125 out of 10.
So I think Will Marsell continue from 15th in the championship now. We've got Fernando Alonso, who's had a pretty mixed bag, I would say. Would you agree with that?
I'm confused by Alonso because he's somehow behind Vettel in the championship. So 9th in Bahrain, retired in Saudi, 17th in Australia because he retired or was just bad?
He had that problem in qualifying, which made him crash.
Yeah, he crashed in that pole lap.
Oh yeah, there was a weird one in the race. He pitted again, and I thought he'd come forward, but he just didn't.
He pitted for mediums, and the mediums just craned up instantly.
And then he had that side pod issue.
Yeah, just got a bit unlucky in Imola. I think he's done better than his results suggest, but then what are we judging it off?
I think he's been like the most unlucky driver for sure this season because he had an engine problem in Bahrain, which meant that he was quite slow in the race. Then he had to retire in Saudi because he had a problem again. And then in Australia, he had obviously the whole qualifying issue. And, his pace was so good that he was like putting 6-7 tenths on Ocon.
Yeah.
He was probably in contention for like 3rd or 4th.
I think he was stuck in a DRS train in Australia as well.
I mean, that's like, same with Hamilton in like Imola. It can be just impossible to pass then.
Yeah.
I'll give him a 7.5 out of 10.
I would have to go by his results and not with, I guess, the if, buts and maybes that could have been his results. So I would have to be a bit harsh on Fernando and save off 5 on 10. But I do think there's more to come from him if the results do go his way.
I was going to go for a 5 as well, actually.
I was going to go for a 6, mainly because he had a good points position. He's shown good pace, but he has just not had that luck to really help him. So I think I would have given him a 6 in that respect.
So that is 23. If I can do maths correctly.
Well, the 5
5 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7.
Yeah, 22.5.
No, 5 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7, that's 23.
Yeah, but I put 7.
What's divided by, that's 23.
That's 5.75.
5.75.
So,
why have you put the humanities student on the maths?
yeah. But
I'll get on my calculator.
And I think we'll quickly move on to Sebastian Vettel, who's 14th, who's somehow above Alonso in the championship, despite having half a season less so far, and especially in that shocking weekend on Australia, and then a really solid weekend in Imola. I mean, I
think I'm just going to go 6. I think I'd go 7. Because realistically, 8th in an Aston Martin, it might have actually improved. We are unaware, but 8th in Aston Martin is a very good performance.
As a Vettel fan, I really just want to forget Australia, and I'm going to put that down to the fact that he jumped into the car after like a month and a half.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a very characteristic Vettel weekend, but Imola, I would struggle to give him anything less than a 10 on 10 for that weekend because he's outperformed that car in every single session at that weekend. So overall, obviously I would love to ignore Australia, but I can't. So overall, I would have to give Vettel, I would say, an 8 on 10 for his 2 race season so far.
It's weird because his race in Imola is probably one of the best this season, finishing at 8th and also finishing the top 10 in qualifying. But also his weekend in Australia is probably one of the worst I've seen from any racing driver. I mean, you crash in practice, you like drive off the track in the race, and then you crash again. Like, it was just embarrassingly bad. So I think it cancels out. I'll give him a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
I was going to give him a 7. Mainly because of that stellar weekend in Imola, but then just brought down by that shocking weekend in Australia. As a Vettel fan myself as well, I think that's pretty much for the fairest I can go.
Okay, and that is a 7.
So yeah, at least
I can do that.
I'm more clean a score there. And then we'll move on to the 2 AlphaTauris. We'll start with Pierre Gasly because he's 13th. So he has not had the start the season compared to what we've seen last year. I mean, last year we saw him a stellar season from Gasly last year, but this season not as much, or was it which says
I'm still trying to work out how good that AlphaTauri is. It's a very confusing car.
It's all over the place, that car.
I think it's just Gasly's just been doing what Gasly's been doing the last 2 seasons, which is just putting in the lower top 10 results and just, I don't know, he's putting in decent performances, I guess, but I think what's alarming to me with Gasly this time is Tsunoda has actually really picked it up this season. So if I'm comparing, the only scale I have to see how good the AlphaTauri is to compare him to Tsunoda, and in that respect, I think Tsunoda has had the better of him for a lot of this season. So with that regard, I would have to give Gasly a 6 probably.
I think I'll go for a 7. I think he's been as good as he usually is, but I think it's more Tsunoda has upped his game. You know, he's a serious talent. We saw that in F2.
Yeah, I'll probably go for a 6, mainly because Tsunoda's had 2 better results than Gasly.
I was going to go for a 6 as well, actually. I think Gasly's dropped back, and I think Tsunoda's stepped up, especially over last season. I think that, like I was saying, the AlphaTauri, it's very difficult to tell how quick that is. You know, there are some cars you know are quick, there are some cars you know are slow. AlphaTauri, McLaren, I have no clue where they are at the moment.
They've just been completely all over the place, so I think that racks up to a 6.75 there.
6.25.
25.
How are you the sense you didn't hit?
Yeah, come on.
I'm doing this mentally, yeah. But yeah, we'll move on to the other AlphaTauri quickly. Yuki Tsunoda. He's pretty much only had 3 races because in Saudi Arabia he had like gearbox issue which didn't let him start the race. So technically his 3 results has been 8th in Bahrain, 15th in Australia, and then a fantastic 7th in Imola. So
he did wonders for my fantasy team, and I'll give him a 7 because of that.
Tsunoda's quietly been doing a good job, I think, in that car, which, like Will said, we do not know where its performance stands. So I think I would give Tsunoda a very respectable 8 on 10.
I'll give him a 7. I think him and Gasly have been pretty much even this season. So yeah, 7.
I think the fact that Tsunoda's pretty much decided he actually has to work this season. So then last year he couldn't be bothered last season. I think Franz Tost has finally managed to get it into his head that Tsunoda actually needs to do some work this season. He's really shown his results with that 8th and 7th. I think I'll give him an 8 out of 10 for that.
So 7.5.
Nice. So yeah. And then we had the first of the McLarens. It's Danny Ricciardo. I don't know what to say, but
McLaren, very confusing again.
Exactly.
They were dire in Australia and Saudi Arabia, and then have become really good in Australia and Imola, but still he's not really performing. I feel bad for him because he's such a nice guy.
If you see, it's almost like if you were to look at the 2 races that McLaren has delivered Ricciardo and Norris a points finishing car, which was Australia and Imola. Australia, he pretty much finished inside Norris's gearbox at the last corner, and Saudi Arabia, it was a case of what could have been with the Sainz collision, I guess. Maybe he could have been where Norris was at the end, but then again, I guess I am also going by a could have, should have, would have, and that's not unfortunately how motorsport works. So I would have to be a bit harsh on Daniel, and given the car he's had to drive, give him a 6 on 10.
Yeah, I'll give him a 6 out of 10 as well. I think he's been closer to Norris than he was last season. You know, in the sprint race in Imola, I think he was quite impressive. He finished only about a couple of seconds behind Norris, having had to make his way through a bit. But the mistake in Imola was in the full race. That's what brings him down a bit.
I think I want to be a little bit harsher and go 5.5. Only probably because I expect a lot more from Daniel Ricciardo. I think it's just more bit of nostalgia and knowing how good Ricciardo can be and sort of the expectations I still have for Ricciardo despite last year's struggles. I feel like he could have done a lot more, especially doing something better.
Well, you made my life very easy because I was going to give him a 5.5 as well. I can't remember who I've given a 6, but I've always thought 6 is average, and realistically, maybe in Bahrain probably didn't have the car to perform. In Saudi Arabia he retired, and then off the 2 races, 6th, probably the best result he was going to get in Australia, and then he did have a crash. Realistically, we've got to think about it like that. So I think 5.5 is fairly fair.
So 5.75, that would be a nice...
Yes.
And
Easy maths.
I'm much better maths. So I think we can move on to the Viking comeback, Kevin Magnussen.
He's had a good season so far. I think finishing in the points every race except for Australia, where Haas just could not get a setup on either of the cars. I think it's proved the kind of driver Kevin Magnussen always has been. It's the 2019-2020 Haas was a bit unfair on him. It almost kind of masked how good him and Grosjean actually were.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he's got a car to actually perform to his capabilities. And so far, it's been pretty much, as far as I can remember, a faultless season from him. So good job to Magnussen. And I would give him an 8 on 10. And I would not be surprised if that rating keeps going up as we progress through.
I think Magnussen may be a bit overrated for his performances this season. He's been out of the sport for a year, so he's clearly not maximising the car. And I think that Haas car is seriously good. And I think
How bad is Schumacher doing?
Yeah, I think Schumacher is just... that's why I had him
just-
so low. He's having a seriously bad season.
Oh,
But, I think he's been pretty good in the whole, so I'll give him 7.5. He's been consistent, but I think there's still more to come from him.
Okay, I gave him a 9. You finished 5th in a Haas in the first race of the season.
But since then...
He's fine.
He's been fine.
Okay, he did very well. So realistically, at the moment, nothing goes badly. The top finish for one of the midfield teams is 7th.
Yeah.
He's finished, 9th and 9th? That's not that
5th,
far
9th,
below.
Australia was a bad
14th
weekend,
and 9th.
Yeah,
That's
Australia's a bad weekend. I mean, I just think he's finished 5th in a Haas on his first weekend back. That's just really good. And I will back this. I'm giving him a 9.
I'll go with Hushrav and I'll go with an 8. I think it's not enough for a 9 because I think Magnussen could have got a couple of better positions in especially like Australia and maybe in Saudi Arabia he had the chance to probably go a bit further up, but I think definitely an 8 out of 10. He's had a stellar. He's had no real faults this season so far yet, which is...
He's also very cheap on Fantasy F1, and it's brilliant, because you can spend all the money elsewhere, and you can always rely on Magnussen to get you points.
Yep. So
Who we got next?
So we move on to 9th, Esteban Ocon. He's actually had a good start to the season, especially with Alpine being possibly the most solid midfield car of the lot, would you say?
Mm-hmm. I mean, 7th, 6th, 7th. I'm giving him an 8.5. That's very for a midfield team that Alpine realistically is. That's incredibly consistent. Before Imola, he was one of 4 drivers to score points at every race.
He had a bit of a nightmare in Imola, but I think that was partly down to just those 4 drivers who were just stuck in that DRS stream for pretty much all of the race.
Me of that house.
So if you were to count Imola out, he's had a very, very solid season, and it's something you've come to expect of Ocon, because even during his Racing Point days, that's what he was always doing. He might not have beat Perez race in, race out, but he was always consistently getting those P6s, P7s, P8s, and I think that's what he needs to do with Alpine this year, because Alpine at this stage I don't think are looking at the big results. They are looking at just getting as many small points in as they can before the car actually might develop further. So I think he's done a very, very good job with that, so I'm going to give Ocon an 8 as well.
I think he's getting massively overrated here, especially in comparison to Alonso, because Alonso's been better this season. It's not his fault that the car's been bad. He was ahead of him in Imola.
You've got to finish the race.
That's not his fault. He's not crashing out. He was ahead of him in Imola, got screwed over by the hydraulics in Australia when he was like 7/10 a lap ahead of Ocon. Jeddah, he was ahead of Ocon again, passed him on track, engine problem. Bahrain, Ocon was probably better, but he's been good. He's been as good as he was last season. Been pretty close to Fernando Alonso. It's no small ask. So I give him a 7 out of 10. But I think the big difference between him and Alonso makes no sense.
Okay,
I'm going to go with an 8 because the 7th, 6th, and 7th, you can't deny that's a fantastic start to the season in a midfield car.
In a car you're not sure is actually the 3rd or 4th fastest car.
Exactly. So I think pretty much there's nothing to argue about there.
7.875, that is. I've fallen back to the calculator. I can't be bothered to do it in my head anymore.
That's fine. But I think we could probably move on to probably the most smug character on the F1 grid right now, with Valtteri Bottas. I mean,
I love this man right now.
Yeah.
He's so funny. It's just perfect for him. Obviously, he's had some very good performances this season. I mean, he's arguably the most consistent driver outside of maybe Bottas. Outside of Bottas, we're talking about Bottas. Outside of Leclerc and Russell, 6th, 8th, 5th. He's challenging the Mercedes, which I imagine he must be really enjoying. And if I've given Ocon an 8.5 for consistency, sounds a bit high now. Well, I'll give Bottas an 8.5 for consistency as well, because I think that Alfa Romeo and the Alpine are probably very similar matched cars.
I'd give him an 8.5 as well. I think he's been really good this season, but I think the car is really fast as well. I think it's like a Gasly-Tsunoda situation. We don't know how good shit is really. And I think in Imola, he probably would have finished in the podium if he had a better pit stop, which kind of shows how great of a race he was doing.
I think for me, Bottas has to be an identical case to Ocon. Good car. He's getting all of it out. I think, weirdly enough, I would actually want to rate him half a point more than Ocon, despite rating them equally, because I think Bottas, coming off of last season, has had more pressure to deal with and has had more to prove to everyone, and I think he's done a fantastic job of sticking up to pretty much every critic of his. So for that reason, I would have to give Bottas an 8.5, and I think there's a big result coming from him.
So I'll make my life easy.
I was going to make your life easy because I was actually going to say 8.5 as well. I'm not that mean. Don't worry, I'm not that mean to you.
Right, so 8.5. Do you want me to run through the ones before we go to another break quickly?
Yeah, might as well.
So we ended on Guanyu Zhou. So Alonso, we've given a 5.75. Vettel has a 7, Gasly a 6.25, Tsunoda a 7.5, Ricardo 5.75 out of 10, Magnussen 8.125, Ocon a 7.875, and Bottas on an 8.5 out of 10.
I think that sounds respectable. And we're back for the top 7 of the championship.
I don't want to talk. Why is he in 7th? He's 7th in the championship.
7 titles.
And in case you've been living under a rock and don't know who that is, we are talking about Lewis Hamilton here. The 7-time world champion who somehow managed to slip quite a bit. Mostly because of the car, but 7th in the championship.
6. He's had one good race in Bahrain. He had a race he should have got a podium at in, actually no, 5.5. I'm going, you know what, 5? Because he's had he's had 2 really bad races. And he's had 2 ones one where he got a bit unlucky, but still, and one where he probably performed to the best of the car's abilities.
I would argue that his race in Australia was way better than the race in Bahrain, because the race in Bahrain was pretty much just him finishing where he qualified, had it not been for the 2 Red Bulls annihilating their engines in the last 5 laps.
I keep changing. So, I'll go 6 then. I'll go 6.
Yeah,
6 is my final.
I would go 6 with Hamilton right now.
I'll go 7. I think Australia is a really underrated weekend. You know, he was actually challenging Perez in a quicker car, and he had the measure on Russell. I think he was just really unlucky with the VSC there. So
I was going to go for 5 or 6, but I think I'm being a bit harsh at 5, but I think I just expect a lot more from Lewis Hamilton. I mean, especially knowing how his teammate has done, especially. And we'll get on to him later, but I think it's just, I'll give him a 5.
Okay.
So, and I think we'll move on to another Brit, Lando Norris, who's had quite the upward trend. I mean, he started 15th, 7th, 5th, and then 3rd.
I'd actually give him a really high rating. I'd give him 8.5. I think he's been as good as he was last season. It's just the car is a lot weaker. I think even in Jeddah, when the car wasn't that good, he was still performing to the max, getting into Q3 and whatnot. So 8.5.
Again, with me, in a team where I don't know how they are performing relative to the field, my only metric is his teammate. Ricciardo had the measure of him in Bahrain. Saudi was a bit more even until Ricciardo had a DNF, so there was no comparison, but Norris did a good job to get points there. Australia, again, was pretty much even at the end of the race. He's done a good job in Imola, a bit helped by others' misfortunes, obviously, but nonetheless, a podium is a podium. So I'm going to give Lando a 7 on 10, but I do think Ricciardo's definitely bridged the gap, so Lando does have to work to keep that gap ahead this season.
I think mainly because knowing where McLaren started at the beginning of the season and the fact that Lando might have to get to the podium in Imola, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, especially knowing that.
And I've gone for a 7.5 because I think he's had a very Norris season. I think Norris is still underrated. when it comes to drivers on the F1 grid. I think if you gave him a championship-winning car, he'd be up there with Leclerc and Verstappen and challenging for that title. And I think Russell would as well.
Yeah. And I think moving on to the other side of the bromance, Carlos Sainz.
6.5.
Yeah, 6.5.
He's done what? He would have been third in... He's basically done the best he can in 2 races.
Yeah.
Australia was his fault, but and so was Imola, because he crashed in qualifying. He put himself in that situation. So
yeah, a bit unlucky.
It pains me to see Carlos this way, because I've always been an advocate of his, but I would have to be the harshest, surprisingly, out of all of us, and give him a 5 actually, because he's not been quicker than Charles on any weekend, even when he didn't crash. Bahrain and was pretty much Charles all the way through. Australia, he was actually out qualified by Max in what should have been the faster car. The Ferrari was convincingly the faster car at Australia. Saudi as well, he's just had a fairly average weekend. He benefited with Perez getting a bit unfortunate with the safety car. So Sainz has just had a very average season so far, and then you add 2 very costly crashes to that, not only points but also given the cost cap. That's costing a lot of money, so I have to give him a 5.
You know, I have to agree with you that, to be honest, I'm a massive Sainz fan, but I just can't give him more than 5.5. It's just those 2 crashes is just really not... I need to see more from Sainz to really bump up this rating. I need to see him battle Leclerc more. And I think, at least with the time...
You were a 6.5, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
And perhaps the only person to be finishing in the top 5 this whole season, of all people, is George Russell. I mean, I wouldn't lie, I did have my skepticism of Russell when he first came to Mercedes, but I think these first 4 races have anything... They've just proved me wrong, to be honest. I think he's just really been good.
The only session I could fault Russell for all season so far where he's underperformed the car has to be Bahrain qualifying, where he ironically put it in that P9 he criticised Bottas for in the previous season. Minus that, Russell he's not had mind-blowing, fantastic, amazing results. He has just simply done what the car has allowed him to do, and I think that's what every good racing driver should start at as a default and then build up from there. So I think Russell's done a solid job this season, so I am going to give him an 8 on 10 so far.
In F1, where like the car makes the biggest difference, the best parameter for where you're performing is your teammate. And Russell was outperforming 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who many claim to be the greatest ever. So I think he's been really good, really consistent. Perhaps I'll give him an 8.5.
I was going to go 9.5.
I was going to go 9.
I don't think... Wait, so what have we got? 9, 9.5,
8.5.
8.5 and 8. Oh, it makes my life, mate.
8.75.
8.75.
Yeah.
I'll write that down. But yeah, I was going to go 9.5. I don't see how he could have improved on his performances. I think maybe if he'd been in Hamilton in Bahrain, that would be the 1 point, and maybe that's why I've deducted half a point, but I think he's done the best he can realistically in that car.
Yeah, and then I think we'll move on to the first of the Red Bulls. Checo Perez, what do you think? How do you think he's done? Bear in mind, he did have that DNF in the first race of the season where the engine decided, where both Red Bull engines decided it just didn't want to finish the race.
Checo, I think. I would argue Checo has the hardest teammate to go up against. I might not
Easily.
say... it's controversial to say the best driver on the grid, but I would argue the fastest driver over a lap. And the fact that he's got a pole and pretty much match Verstappen's qualifying this season, Checo would have to be my highest rated driver of this season so far, and I am going to give him a 9.5 because using the previous logic, I cannot see how he would have improved his results from what he's realistically achieved. So fair play to him. And
yeah, I'm a big fan of his, and this is like beyond my wildest dreams to have him this good. But yeah, I think like he's been evenly matched with Verstappen, who I believe is one of the fastest, not on the current grid, but of all time. You know, so that's like remarkable. I'll give him a 9 out of 10. I still think like he can have a bit of a better races, like get a bit closer to Verstappen during that.
Yeah,
I've gone for an 8 out of 10. I do think he just can get a bit quicker. I think it's definitely going to be a battle of the second drivers with Sainz and Perez.
yeah. I think I was going to go 8.5, mainly because he still has that gap to Verstappen. But like Hushrav said, you are going against what is at the moment the fastest driver on the grid right now. So obviously, if you don't take the cars into consideration, so I think 8.5 is what I would give him. So we'll move on to the top 2. Max Verstappen.
9.5. I think you've still got to finish the races, and I think if he had finished races, I'd be giving him a perfect 10, but I can't if he's DNF twice, I can't justify giving him a perfect 10 for that, but the stuff he has finished, he has been perfect.
I'll give him a 9. I think this season hasn't been as good as he was last season. The gap to Perez is much smaller than you would expect. I think he's not adjusted that well to the new regulations, but he's still, doing as good as the job he can in the races.
I think with the gap to Perez, I would justify that as Checo upping his game rather than Max actually falling off. And in my head, I would like to have given him a perfect 10. I think for me, what takes away from the perfect 10 is losing pole to Perez in Jeddah. He won the race eventually, so it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But because of the fact that he lost a possible pole, I would have to give him a 9.5, but nonetheless a very solid and faultless season by Max so far.
Yeah, nothing to add there. I think you pretty much said exactly what I was about to say, so I'll give 9.5. No, nothing there. And we have Charles Leclerc, who's currently leading the championship by quite a margin right now, partly because of Max's 2 DNFs with the Red Bull engine woes, but he's had a first, a second, a first, and then a sixth because of a costly mistake he made in Imola. What do you think you'll give him?
I mean, 9.5 again. He's finished. He's finished well. Obviously second in Saudi Arabia, but that mistake has to take. He's not had a perfect season. That mistake has to take half a point off.
I'll give him a 9 as well. I'll give him a 9. He didn't give him 9.5. But I think it's classic Charles Leclerc. He can be incredible for 3 weekends, but he makes these mistakes, which can be quite costly, especially in a championship fight. So he's got to cut that out for the rest of his game.
I think had Charles spun and kept it out of the barrier, I would have given him a 9.5. He hit the barrier, so I'm going to give him a 9 because that touch with the barrier eventually cost him a lot of points, which wouldn't have happened had he just not hit the barrier. And I think a part of it is just down to the fact that he's never been in a championship fight before, so he's taking risks and he's exploring parts of the track he generally wouldn't, and that's costing mistakes. But minus Imola, it has to be the perfect start to the season for Charles, because it's one thing, yes, you could say, Max didn't finish, but he put himself in the places where he could capitalize on Max not finishing, and he's convincingly beat Carlos so far. So fair play to Charles. Minus Imola, I'd have to give him a 9.5. 9, sorry.
Yeah, I'll give him a 9 mainly because of Imola, and probably because Max got the better of Charles in Saudi Arabia, because I think Saudi Arabia is where the 2 cars were actually the most equal. I mean, especially the Ferrari was a bit better around corners, but Red Bull did have slightly better top speed. But I think because Max got the better out in Saudi Arabia, and because of that mistake, I think I'll just give Charles a 9 for that respect.
Okay.
So,
and I'll run through the final 7. So Hamilton got a 6, Norris on a 7.5, Sainz on a 5.875, Russell 8.75, along with Perez on the same on the same score, and then Verstappen and Leclerc on 9.375 and 9.125 respectively.
So, yeah, I think especially from a lot of drivers, we've pretty much had a good start to the season. So, yeah, I think let's see what happens in Miami.
Yep.
I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see that race.
Watch along, 8:30. Be there at the Clarendon.
Sure. All right. This is your host Jim Roger, and thank you for listening to the Warwick F1 show.